Welcome to Kingdom Commentary Podcast, where we discuss the ideas, tools, and narratives that surround what Jesus called the kingdom of God and how they shape our imagination today. In this series, we're looking at how the earliest Christians read the Bible, what they thought the Bible was, and how we can learn from them how to read the Bible better today. Okay, welcome back to Kingdom
Why did I
Commentary.
say Faith and
Oh
Love?
no, that's a good name though. We should have taken that away earlier. Kingdom Commentary Podcast. We are going to talk about the literal interpretation of the Bible today, and by that, we don't mean literal, but we'll get into it.
That's crystal clear.
Yes. All right. But first, how are you doing, Joshua Brinley? How's San Francisco treating you?
It's good, although I feel like I don't participate enough in what it means to be part of San Francisco, I guess. But
San Francisco culture.
yeah, whatever that means, I guess. I feel like, I'm not living like the typical San Francisco thing. Like maybe I just haven't quite gotten used to doing what it is you do in San Francisco, because I end up driving here outside of San Francisco and spend meaningful time with people that don't live in San Francisco. So
Okay.
it's like I dwell there, but I don't feel like super attached to the city, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good food.
Oh yeah, no, great food. That's the one thing that is nice, or one of the things that is nice, is like I go there and I can get anything and it's really good and you have a lot of options. So the food is definitely one of the best places in this area to go is San Francisco for food. And great coffee, and the parks are really cool. Like
Yeah.
Golden Gate Park is really, really fun to
It's so
explore.
much bigger than I thought.
It's huge.
was.
It's the thing that people like to say is like it's bigger than Central Park. It is.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, before we jump into content, in the same vein as last time, I saw a movie recently that is another horror type movie, but instead of being awful, it was great.
Mm-hmm.
And you have not seen it yet, I don't think.
No, I have not.
Long Walk.
Yeah, I've seen the previews, but not
Okay.
the movie yet.
It was so good. I was on the verge of tears for the second half of the movie in the best possible way, where I felt so sad but warm. I don't know, just like this mix of feelings, and it was just so good. And I don't want to spoil it. It's a Stephen King adaptation. It's like this group of people. It's very like Hunger Games. You walk until you can't walk anymore.
Right.
There's a representative from each state in the U.S. You walk until you can't walk anymore. Last person walking gets millions of dollars. Everyone else gets killed as they stop walking. So dystopian, hard to watch, yeah, but not just dark for the sake of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like really rich themes that, oh my God, that like broke me while I was watching it. And I can't get into details without spoiling it. So you have to see it, and then I can give people a warning and whatever. Sure. But we'll talk about something. But that one I highly recommend. There are some cheesy lines, deliveries, and some weird dialogue, and Mark Hamill's in it, and he's kind of playing.
Really?
Yeah, and I love Mark Hamill.
I don't think I saw him in the Is he in the preview?
I don't know. I love Mark Hamill.
I would have known.
He definitely felt like a video game character in the movie, though. Like every line he said, it was like, "Keep walking." Like, I don't know, just like really,
oh, he's one of the evil people.
Yeah, and it just sounded really like he was in like not a real movie.
Yeah.
Like he was a cartoon and everyone else. But it didn't matter. At some point in the movie, like I didn't care about bad lines because the movie was so good.
Yeah.
And everything else worked so well that I was like, I forgive. And yeah. Anything you've been watching that you recommend or don't recommend? Worst movie ever, best?
Yeah, I've been watching this show called Only Murders in the Building, which is pretty big now. It has some pretty well-known people.
Yeah.
It's good. It's very like modern culture, like they say some, like, cringy things and
Huh?
some, like, culturally relevant things where it's just like, "Oh, that was, like" I don't know. I feel like I get enough
Like
of that just,
TikTok
like
references?
yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah,
Like, very like, explicitly TikTok and, like,
yeah, yeah.
things like that, but, um, the mystery aspect to it is kind of fun, and it's, like, silly in a fun way, and so I've been watching that.
I wanna watch. Like, I tried it. I tried 2 episodes, I
Yeah.
think, and I didn't get into it or I didn't get hooked. But so many people I know love it, and it's doing so well. And I love Steve Martin
Yeah.
and Murphy and even
Yeah.
Selena Gomez, but I never, like it never grabbed me at first. But I saw Paul Rudd is in 1 season. I was like, oh,
2 seasons, actually.
okay, I'll keep watching.
Yeah.
I'll try it again."
And it's funny well, yeah, I won't spoil anything, but a new season just came out too, so I just started watching that because I started watching it right before so 4 seasons had come out, and I think it's the 5th season now, and, yeah, so it was kinda perfect time to start watching it because I didn't have to wait
Yeah.
a super long time for the next season to come out, but yeah, it's decent, so not bad.
But what do you like about it? Is it funny or is it the mystery or
Yeah,
the actors?
it's very comedy driven, and sometimes they say some crazy things, but yeah, it's just like they're all so silly, and it doesn't take itself like too seriously. There's some more like serious themes, but it's largely comedy driven, and I kind of like that because it's just so ridiculous. I don't know. I just think it's like it's like a decently put together
Alright.
show, and it does the mystery like decently well, so it's worth watching.
Okay. We got 2 Rex this time. Last
Yeah.
time was just don't watch him.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
stand by that.
Yeah.
Don't watch him. Well, and if you do, don't expect it to be good.
No, watch it with friends to laugh, but not
Yeah, it is kind of one of those movies where it gets to that, it's like, is it kind of yeah. Anyways,
yeah. We talk
we
we don't need to waste more time.
talked about him. We don't need to
Yeah.
talk about him anymore.
Yeah. All right. So today we are going to talk about biblical literalism and literal readings of the Bible
Mhm.
and historical readings of the Bible. And we did like a brief overview last time, but this time I want to like dive into some of the nitty gritty of what the early church fathers and mothers meant when they talked about the importance of reading the Bible literally. Because it's not what it sounds like. This might be one of the areas our tradition is actually most different in how comfortable they are with this.
Hmm.
Because we didn't get into it that much last time, but you grew up Anglican, but not just that. Your father was a priest
Mhm.
and was heavily influenced by Greek Orthodox.
Mhm.
Um, and both of those traditions take the Bible super, super seriously. They're not like progressive, throw it to the side kind of traditions. They're like, let's hold on to the Bible, but they also read it very differently than the church I grew up in. And I should clarify too. I grew up in a lot of Pentecostal churches and Reformed evangelical churches, and moved around a lot. Um, but and today I would probably I'm just I don't know, charismatic, non-denominational American evangel I never know what to say
You sound
exactly.
you're like reducing yourself.
I know. I just well, I don't really know. It's weird when
You
as
don't
soon as
belong to
like
anyone,
that's what the denominational vibe is.
huh?
I like it, but that's like it's like you're only defined by what you're not and not what you are
Mm.
sometimes.
Mm.
Pros and cons, mostly cons, I think, but that's still my tradition. I kinda wanna be faithful to, like, where like, I used to have some, like, hesitancy about describing myself as charismatic or Pentecostal,
Mm.
and now I'm like, that informed my whole way of growing up.
Yeah.
That informs the way I read theology today. Even the parts of that tradition I don't like because it feels like I'm a part of it, not because it feels like it's something outside.
Mm.
And so I kinda wanna own that a little bit. But I do think one of the things that hurt maybe the way I read the Bible in that tradition was maybe an overemphasis on biblical literalism in a specific way. So, in a way that your church, I'm assuming we'll talk about it,
Yeah.
did not have
Okay.
growing up. So biblical literal, like when we say literal, today, I mean, I think what comes to my mind, if you say I read the Bible, if someone told me I read the Bible literally, sort of like this attitude, like the Bible says it, that settles it, I believe it.
Take it at face value.
Take it at face value,
Yeah.
type of reading. And the first thing I would push against maybe, just the idea, is that nobody reads the entire Bible literally. Nobody. Like, there are some people that are like, "I wanna take, I don't know, maybe this part of Genesis or this part of Revelation and read it really literally. Like, what it says is what it means." But that person would not take a psalm as literally.
Yeah.
Like, you don't read a psalm that says, "You are my rock," and then you're like, "God is a rock. God is literally a rock, and I worship a rock." Or Song of Songs, where this man is describing, or this woman is describing this man is like, "Oh, your teeth are like flocks of
Your
sheep,
your
and
legs
your
are like slabs of alabaster.
alabaster,
Like
your legs are slabs of alabaster," and you're like, "Wow, I can't believe that there was this woman that existed that had legs made of alabaster." Like, everyone knows, this is a poem. And because this is a poem, it's meant to be read a specific way,
right.
and that way is not the same way that you read historical document.
Yeah, and you can only take that idea so far until it becomes like, clearly this isn't the literal style of this, and it doesn't apply, and so it's
Yeah.
just like then the whole framework kinda breaks down because if you try and apply one size fits all to the whole Bible, it clearly doesn't work that way, and so
And I
where do you go from there?
I do think one of the issues, not issues, that's maybe too strong of a word, but like hangups or false expectations we get is when you get the Bible, you get one book and it reads the same way all the way through because it's translated by the same group.
Mm,
And it doesn't prepare you for the fact that it's a library of different kinds of books.
yeah,
Like a third of the Bible is poetry. That there are different genres. There's apocalyptic literature, which is a certain genre we don't have anymore. There's comedy, there's drama, there's horror, there's creation stories. Like all these things are their own genres, written in their own style, in their own way, with their own expectations. When you read through the Bible, um, like different movies have totally different genres, totally different expectations. Like you don't expect to laugh very much if you're going to watch a war movie,
right,
and you don't expect to be scared if you're going to see a rom com. And if you expect them all to function the same way, you're going to be shocked when they don't. And the Bible has so many different kinds of genre, and we don't realize what the genre is, and we just read it the way we wanna read it, or, like, the way we assume it's all read the same. It kinda comes up like a flat literalism, I think,
yeah,
that doesn't take, that in it's kind of ironic 'cause I have some sympathy that it's usually in the pursuit of taking the Bible very seriously, but it kinda ironically doesn't take the Bible seriously enough to appreciate its diversity
mhm.
and its culture and its history. I don't know.
On the same, like, note of the Psalms, one
Yeah.
psalm I don't actually remember which psalm it is, but, um, it's been prayed a few times where I think at the end it's something that talks about enemies being made a portion for jackals and being,
Yeah.
like, put down by the sword. I've always thought that that part always made me a little uncomfortable. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
"Am I really praying
There's a
this?
lot of
Like,
songs that
what is the context of this? And, like, is that really how I feel about my
honestly,
enemies? How does that, like"
I think when we get to, like, the
I'm like, "Wow."
allegorical one and we, like, dive in there and the moral one, that might actually help with that a little, or,
Yeah.
like, kinda engage it on another
Yeah,
level.
yeah,
Like, how do we read those parts of Psalms that make us uncomfortable if
yep,
we're taking them too literally?
yep.
Because I don't want my coworker that rubbed me the wrong way to be eaten by jackals tomorrow,
No.
even though in the moment I might feel like he's my enemy. And I'm like you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But, uh but yeah, how do we adopt those and read them faithfully? And yeah, I think
Or mauled
that's
by
very encouraging.
bears.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So if no one reads the Bible literally,
Mhm.
because it's impossible, like it doesn't work that way. We have to sort of pick and choose which parts are, and I think the word literal even sets up a false expectation. I think it's not really a helpful word. But I think you could say like which parts of the Bible are historical, are meant to describe historicity.
Yeah.
Which parts of the Bible are meant to describe scientific fact? Which parts are not? Are any parts? Which parts are trying to communicate truth on a deeper level? Um, and I think when you come to the Bible and realize a few things, like one, um, the the authors have clues for what they intend this story to be. Like the fact that it's written as a poem, Song of Songs, and the fact that it's like a romance story, but doesn't really identify any of the characters. All kind of just signal to us intuitively, this is poetry. This is a metaphorical depiction of something real, But that doesn't mean that the story's not true. It just means in what way is it true? Is
Yeah.
it trying to tell a historical event? Is it trying to tell the truth about something about love, the truth about something about God and his people, the truth about sex in some way? Is it trying to communicate like truth on what level? I think is an important distinction. Um, because someone could say, I believe the Bible is true, and that's why I'm reading it literally. But they could only mean historically true, or only mean scientifically true, or only mean uh, metaphorically true. And they could all be different levels of truth. And I think in my tradition, at least, there was such a high priority put on it being historically accurate in every instance, and
Interesting.
scientifically for the purpose of apologetics,
Mhm.
first and foremost. So what I wanna do is kinda mess with that a little bit,
Yeah.
but not in a way I wanna be careful too, because I really do think the intention of people reading that way is good. Like, because they see the Bible is valuable, they see it as they wanna treat it authoritatively, they wanna put aside their own biases and just engage in the text, and I think those are all good impulses. I just think there are things we can be careful of when we do that. Did your church grow up with those kinds of conversations, or was that never even really a thing?
I don't remember that being at the forefront.
Yeah.
Literalism never, like yeah, I mean, that wasn't really a word in my vocabulary. At least yeah, I mean, I feel like in the context that I was in, the most that I remember, honestly, of going to church when I was a kid, being raised in the church with my dad being a priest and all of that is, like, more of the child's perspective, not necessarily the Bible discipleship perspective. And so, like, one of the biggest things is, like, I got this grand overarching theme of, like, all of these stories, especially in the Old Testament, like, very vivid imagery of, like, I know this story and I know this story, but I feel like I didn't really go down super deep with what it was, and so maybe I got more of that story allegorical, the way that these things are fitting together rather than, yeah, finding historical fact, what that even meant, whether or not that was super important to me at the time. And admittedly, like, I didn't really take Bible discipleship that seriously until a handful of years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't think I had meaningfully engaged in that way to know, like, whether or not the way I was reading the Bible matched up with the people around me or that tradition or was different from other people because yeah, it wasn't maybe it wasn't just a meaningful way that I was engaging with people at the time.
Yeah.
And so I think our context is different because largely what I had was knowing the tradition that I was in and, like, the ways that would practically affect the way that the service was oriented, the order of things, why we did certain things, and then connecting that back to the Bible wasn't as much of an emphasis, and that feels weird to say, but in a way, I was sort of just along for the ride,
Yeah.
and, that wouldn't necessarily exist in your context given that everything was so centralized around the Bible, and I just didn't quite have that.
Yeah, that it is fun, like, going back and forth a little between, like, more evangelical Reformed Pentecostal, there's a slightly
Yeah.
different emphasis, because in the more evangelical Reformed world, the Bible was almost it felt like the center of the faith,
Yeah.
and I think that's an important, like, uh actually Jesus is the center of the faith, and the kingdom is the center of the faith, and the Bible's been the most reliable one of the most reliable tools in church history to know Jesus and the kingdom.
Yeah.
But when it's put in the center, it's actually not being faithful to what the Bible is meant to do. On the other extreme, in the more Pentecostal side, sometimes we didn't take the Bible that seriously at all because we were so focused on emotional experience,
Experiential, yeah.
experiential relationship with God, that truth and what it meant to be authoritative kind of undervalued.
Mm.
And those kind of conflicted in my mind when I was younger. Um,
Yeah.
but both still emphasize literalism in a very extreme way. Well, let's use a case study real quick.
Yep.
and then jump into a few examples of just different ways of reading different texts. And I think we can just jump in and kind of freak some people out right away. And I'm Genesis 1, I think, is one that people jump to when they're arguing about whether or not something is literal. And I think actually even before we get there, one of the most helpful things in my experience for like understanding how to read the Bible, the biggest reframings when I was studying came from Karl Barth, and then sometimes how Karl Barth's work was interpreted later by like scholars today, like Pete Enns,
Hmm.
and how Karl Barth talked about the humanity and divinity of Jesus, and that there's this mystery in that Jesus in the Christian faith is fully human and fully God,
Yep.
and that those don't contradict, um, but somehow work together. That he reveals the essence of who God is, and he reveals the essence of what a human being is at once.
Mm.
Because God in Jesus, fully revealed, is self-giving love that's constantly humbling himself and becoming one with his creation. And that
Hello.
and that's who God is. Like he's one that works through humans. That
Yeah.
he creates humans to be his image, and when he saves the world, he does it as a human
Yeah.
because that's what humans. And then that shows what humans are for. That humans are the image of God that are in their nature like growing to become one with God
Yeah.
and fully embodying God's presence and rule in the world. And that Jesus is this depiction of both, because he is fully human and fully God. And fully human actually means he doesn't sin, because humanity was created to be fully with God and not sin, but sins and falls into chaos and evil, because we're like l- operating less than what we are. Um, but Jesus operated in the fullness of who he was. But even without sinning, because he existed in this world, he limited his capacities to a human being, meaning he grew in knowledge and wisdom from when he was a kid. He
Yeah.
wasn't born with infinite like languages and no, he was born with the capacity of a baby. God was born with the capacity of a baby, purposely limiting himself to the capacity of a baby. Growing up, learning from his parents, learning from the people around him. Even in the New Testament, it says he's growing in wisdom, like learning new ways to be wise every day, fully relying on God. Um, and I think it's important, like, this might ruffle, but like, not sinning doesn't mean not like ever getting sick, doesn't mean not ever participating in like a mistake as far as like, forgetting your friend's birthday or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, that's not, uh, without maybe being fully, I don't know, imagine being fully loving, but just like having a human mind, like
Yeah.
that's limited on purpose, and allowing that to be part of what it means to be a human being, and that God wanted to work through that, like that limited capacity. And once you see that, I think it reframes the whole Old Testament too, where you realize God is almost acts immorally. Sometimes it feels like because he's just working with he's so committed to working with immoral human beings. And he's
Yeah.
constantly like having to like negotiate and just like be like, all right, you guys messed it up so bad, and I'm still gonna work through it
Yeah.
and make it good again and again and again. Because that's how he wants to rule is in
Yeah.
relationship with human
Yeah.
beings.
Yeah.
So Karl Barth takes that and he looks at the Bible as this inspired divine word. But also, he's like, it's important that God didn't hand it out of the sky, golden tablets. God didn't like possess people to write it and they don't know what they're writing and they're just like, like, and they read it and they're like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? I was in a trance and now it's here
Yeah.
or whatever. Or like, even you see like the memes of Revelation, writing Revelation and Sean just like being blasted with a vision and, like, writing it down and freaking out and then being like, "I don't know what this meant." But actually, um, humans in full cognitive awareness,
Yeah.
writing things with their own intention on purpose, and that, of course, that's how God would write, is through human beings. Like, if God saves the world through human beings, even in frailty and, limited capacity, then he's going to reveal his story through human beings in their limited capacity on purpose. And it doesn't mean it's wrong or there's mistakes as far as like fatal errors that will cause you to lose the track of what's going on. But it means that he's communicating a story through people with what they knew, and that it's the Bible is a fully human text as well. And for it to be fully divine, actually, it has to be fully human, in that way, like because that's how God works in the world. His spirit works through human beings. And in Jesus, the fullness of who he was, he worked as a human being and God, and the fullness of a human text would be a divine text, so that it has to be fully human and divine. And with that, I think you could say it's a faithful, accurate description of the story God wanted to give us. And it allows you to say, what were the human beings behind this text meaning? And without being like, it has to be one or the other, or that they're in
Yeah.
conflict in some way.
Yeah.
So that helped me a lot in reading.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And it points to, I mean, yeah, the very message of the Bible itself points to the fact that the Bible is not a I don't know. It has simple messages, but in it itself is not inherently supposed to be a simple
Yeah.
message.
Yeah.
It's so multifaceted, it's so
And it was
layered, and the meaning, just in like what you were talking about the communion of what Jesus represents as fully God and fully human, and that complex idea that is not a simple idea. It's like
no.
an idea that people were like, huh, and then
Yeah, I had to work
kept
out for
meeting
years. Yeah.
about for a while, and then they're like came to a consensus like, okay, this is what we think this all means. This is what Jesus was, and that yeah,
But
that informs all of the ideas of how we then go and read the Bible.
And I think in my context, like that I grew up in, the divinity of the Bible somehow took precedence over the humanity of it,
Mm.
as if they were in conflict, as
As
if
if
they
it
didn't
kind of
work
drops
together.
down, yeah, as
As
if
if
they were
saying, yeah,
isolated.
as if saying, like looking into the historical background of it and
Yeah.
who the writers were and what they might have meant took away somehow from the divinity of it, and instead of working together.
And I think the idea that humans can make all these horrible mistakes, have made horrible mistakes,
Yeah.
are prone to doing horrible things to each other, I think it is actively working to undermine the idea of tradition and seeking to rip that apart from what the origins of the Bible are.
Yeah, yeah. Because if it dropped out of heaven, then it's beyond tradition. In the sense that, no one had to assemble it and argue about what's canonical and what's not.
Right.
Nobody had to, like, do the messy work of, like, does this book fit in or not? And when we look at that and we realize, "Ooh, this book, like, the Shepherd of Hermes almost made it into the Bible and Revelation almost didn't." That could, like, freak someone out
Mhm.
if they don't trust that, like, God's involved in these human processes over time. Um, but okay, let's jump into Genesis 1 real quick. Case study. And it's the one that people get so, I think, heated about even today, maybe less so today than like 10 years ago. But, and I want to kind of diffuse that a little bit if possible. I'm not trying to like create an edge to this conversation at all.
Mhm.
But I do think it's important to walk through. I think this is a good case study. But Genesis 1 is a creation story that is very similar to like a Babylonian creation story
Right.
or an Assyrian creation story. And it's the description of the universe is very unique compared to how we think of the universe today, like the cosmology of their universe. Because they describe a dome being created on day 2 that separates water above from water below, as if the sky's made of water. Because you look up there and it's all blue, and it looks like it could be water behind there somewhere, and water falls out of it sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, and you get a flat Earth. It's very clearly flat. And not only that, it gets described as flat several times later,
Mm.
standing on pillars in the water. And then that's like how they saw. Wait, imagine living in the Iron Age, looking around you, and seeing the world. How would you not think the world was flat?
Right.
There's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way. And
It's logical. I get it.
I think the point is God's not going to come out of the sky and tell you actually the world's round. If you're writing my book, make sure you get that in there. Like he's working through the humans where they're at. And they're still communicating truth. Like, the point of this story is God is creating this ordered world, and there's so much meaning in that creation story, like how God takes chaos and brings order, takes abandoned areas and fills it with life. It reveals who God is, what his purpose is for creation, how he wants to rest in his creation and fill it, how he wants humans to image him in his creation and
Mm.
fill it. And all of those are truths. And if we were to look at that section and say, and sort of bring our questions first. So our questions might be scientific questions like, is the world flat or not? Because all of our evidence says that it's not, but this looks like it is. So I'm going to say it is, or something, rather than what could the author have intended in this passage first and foremost? What do we know from other creation stories? Other creation stories all start with like a chaotic ocean. They usually start with a battle. This one doesn't start with a battle. What does
Mhm.
that mean about God? That he doesn't start with violence. He starts with no
Right.
competition.
It's not like this cosmic
Yeah,
fight of the gods, and then one triumphs and becomes leader of all
which most
conquering.
creation stories were at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Instead, it's God with no competition bringing something out of nothing.
yeah.
Like, what does that mean? Or what does it mean that sacred spaces were built over 7 days or 7 years, and he builds the universe in 7 days? And like, how are we supposed to think about the universe as a sacred space if it's built in the same way that temples and holy places were built? And I think those kinds of things, like the when you look into the historical background of creation stories, creation myths, when you look into the historical background of what kind of literature Genesis 1 is, and how scholars compare it to other kinds of literature, then you really start to see all these truths emerge, the truths that the author wants to communicate. And then when we take our own questions, which are important questions, like, were humans created separately than animals, or did we come from animals? Or, or
Mm.
how does that complicate things? Those are important questions. Like, and I think those are important to come to. But to realize the people that wrote the Bible didn't have those questions because they didn't live now, they lived then. And so we shouldn't expect them to be even addressing those questions that they didn't have there and then
Yeah,
in this kind of reading.
yeah.
And that doesn't mean those questions aren't important,
Mhm.
and it doesn't mean they can't be wrestled with the Bible, but that's not their primary concern first, I think is an important layer of the historical reading. Uh, Book shout out, second time. Um, if you want to spend a lot of time on Genesis 1 specifically, this guy, John Walton, he's one of the best. He has this phrase, I think that would apply to this whole episode, that's like, the Bible was written for us, but it wasn't written to us. It
Mm.
was written in its own cultural time to its own audience. And the more we learn about that time and audience, the more we learn about the historical way of reading the Bible. And he talks, I think, in a way that anyone could understand, not just like scholarly,
Yep.
whatever, like really down to earth way about what Genesis 1, what kind of literature it is, what kind of other literature exists in the same way, what the words mean behind the text, and how we're supposed to read it. And I think it's one of the most valuable resources. So if you want to do a deep dive there, I don't want to get too hung up on
I go
just Genesis
John
1, but
H. Walton.
John H.
You
Walton, yeah. I think he's one of the best like historical readers of the Old Testament, especially. Um, but I think it's important again, just to look at what kind of story is this supposed to be?
yeah.
Because there's a lot of poetic symbolism in Genesis 1 that's not in Genesis 12. And then you realize that might be a different kind of story, like trying to communicate different things.
Mhm.
Like the Psalms are written differently than Exodus. And Exodus is written differently than Kings. Like Kings is way more like keep track of this historical record
Right.
in this kind of way. And even Chronicles is like the same story, but way less interested in the historical record and way
Yep.
more interested in certain meanings and themes
Yeah.
in ways that even contradict Kings
Yeah.
sometimes.
And it's also just like a more overarching like recap.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like notes like, "Hey, we went over this, and
yeah, yeah.
what are we drawing from it?"
I think one of the fears that people, especially in the evangelical tradition, have is if you say part of Genesis 1 is maybe not historically, not intended to be historically reliable, how can you say the resurrection of Jesus is intended to be historically reliable?
Hmm.
Something like that.
Hmm.
And I don't think that's actually a totally unfounded fear
Sure.
because, there was this movement in, like, the 19th century, especially in Germany, called the historical critical method, where they decided, let's take the Bible, and there's all these really, like, progressive scholars, and they were like, "Let's assume let's not assume that it's truth, and let's just do historical analysis. And after we just do historical analysis, anything not compatible with that, we're gonna throw out." And there was a very anti-religious bias that sort of comes through clearly in what they did. Um, and that really set the stage for like modern scholarship, where it's
Mhm.
like, let's just look at the history and let's assume no other way of reading. So the other senses, let's throw those out. Let's just look at what they intended. And if it doesn't match how we talk about it, let's throw it out. And it was a very not, and I think the reaction in the church is like, you can't just throw out away the resurrection of Jesus or the virgin birth because it doesn't make sense to you, or just because, uh, and so there was this, I think, need to defend all of it being true in the most basic way,
Mhm.
as if it's all one thing. And new words got invented like inerrancy or infallibility to like just try to like say basically I take the Bible seriously.
Yeah.
And I don't think those words are even all that helpful now, because they're relatively new and just used to draw these lines. But I think it's important to say, like, we can look and see what did the gospel writers want to mean when they wrote this. It seems pretty clear they actually wanted you to think Jesus rose from the dead.
Yeah.
Um,
It's pretty central.
yeah, pretty central. Like they're trying to defend that almost, especially in like Luke. Like he appeared to all these people. And you're like, that's intentional. Like he's trying to prove this story. Um, Meanwhile, you read Jonah or Job, and you see this poem or this story of this that's written like a comedy,
Yeah.
and you don't like where cows are wearing grieving clothes
Yeah.
and fasting because they're repenting,
Mhm.
and God's like, I want to have mercy on them and their cows. And the pagan sailors are faithful to God, but God's prophet is not. And a
Yeah.
king of Assyria is faithful to God, which would be
Miraculously.
miraculously, which is like in that time, that's like imagine like the biggest, worst, and um, like
Empire.
Nazi Germany, like all of a sudden, oh, we're all Christians now in this story, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
But then the one faithful person, you're like, how is he not faithful to God? How does he hate God? But they love, like it's written very ironically.
Yeah.
Um, but the Gospel of Mark is not written in that way. The Gospel of Mark is written very different. The Gospel of Luke is written very differently. Acts is written completely differently.
Yep.
And we can't just read them all the same way. We got to look at what was the intention. And I think the literal reading of the Bible in the best sense is the way the author intended it to be read, which we don't always know. But like,
Yeah.
how can we how did they intend us to read it? And if they intended us to read it literally or historically, then we should read it historically. If they didn't intend us to read it historically, then not only are we imposing sometimes, but or like we're bringing our own assumptions and putting it on the text that wasn't meant for that question. I don't know. How's that?
What do you
eh,
think about the I mean, since the whole, like, identity of Jesus is so central, like, that's one of the things that I've heard most about when it comes to, like, literal interpretation and people trying to distinguish what was historical versus what may have just been more literary device,
Yeah.
ironic, whatever. Um, with the life of Jesus, there's like an overwhelming urge for people to be like, this was historical, and we have these accounts of people as witnesses, and apart from like the Gospels as witness accounts, and be like, a lot of people, like even Christian, non-Christian people, will be like, yeah, I mean, historically, like this was a person who existed, and all of this, and like, I mean, uh, out of all like these things, miraculous things that are accounted for in the Bible, like that's the one that people are like, actually, we can agree on this. Like
Yeah.
this probably
Well,
most definitely happened. Whether or not they agree on
I
like the
think
divinity aspect, I don't know, but
the Bible, I think it's important that like it's truth, but there's a hierarchy of truths within it. Not only that, there are more important truths than others in it. I think that's important too. Like,
How dare you say the Gospels are more important than the Song of
I'm not
Songs?
saying that. I'm not necessarily saying that even, but I am saying that, like, the belief in the resurrection of Jesus is more important than the belief in Job
Yeah,
existing, rather than
I
being
would agree with
like
that.
or being a historical figure, and that's an important distinction. That it might be important, but it's not the same level of importance. And the author is clearly not making the same level of claim that this happened. But I think there's an important distinction too in the way we tell history and the way they told history. Because you can read all the gospels and people don't love, but like there are contradictions in the gospel accounts themselves.
Yeah.
And, to know that they were okay with that, and they knew that people in the early church knew that, they weren't ignorant of that, but they were fine with it, and they didn't even think of addressing it, challenges the way we tell history. Because we 'Cause
Yes.
we're in, like, post-enlightenment, we're like, "Give me the video camera footage in the most clear way,"
Yeah.
and if something is, like, contradicts, we're like, "It's not true," like, it could all be made up, but that's not how they thought. Like, they were very one of the things I use in my classroom when I'm teaching this is, like, we'll read how in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus dies on a Friday, but in John, he dies on a Thursday,
Mhm.
and it's pretty clear, and some people really try to, like, harmonize, like, maybe it was Thursday this late and Friday this early, and it overlapped, and it was both or something, but I think that's really just trying to make something fit that doesn't, in my opinion. But I also show them, like, 2 clips of, okay, have you ever seen the Steve Jobs movie? There's just 2. Um, there's a Steve Jobs movie with Michael Fassbender called Jobs, and it won an Academy Award, and it was really well made. And then there's a Steve Jobs movie called Steve Jobs with Ashton Kutcher, and it's really bad. And it's really funny how bad it is. He does not do a good job.
Uh,
I like Ashton, I guess, but it just was not his role. And Michael Fassbender plays it so seriously and with depth, and Ashton Kutcher plays him like an insecure kinda, like, dweeb. And there's, like, this parallel scene where he fires somebody in both the scenes,
yeah.
done completely differently. And one of them, it like, when you're watching the Ashton Kutcher one, it feels kinda like The Office. There's, like, a lot of awkward silence. That he's yelling at someone, and it's just they're uncomfortable, and they leave, and it's played almost like a comedy. But in the Michael Fassbender one, it's serious. There's dark, like, shadows on the wall. It's dramatic music being played. There's flashbacks in it that, like, add depth to the moment. The person looks heartbroken, and then they leave. Both of those told super differently. They contradict each other when you show them side by side. And then I'm like, "But does that mean that Steve Jobs never fired that person?" And they're like,
Mm.
"No, of course he did." And I'm like, "You're right. Of course he did, because they're both telling you that he did. But why would they tell it differently from each other?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Because they're trying to highlight a different part or a different meaning in that interaction. But that doesn't mean that it didn't happen." And like Mark could be like trying to portray Jesus as mysterious, and Luke could be trying to portray Jesus as like this prophet, and Matthew as like this Moses savior, and they could all highlight a different part and tell the story slightly differently in a way that contradicts. Like John is trying to show Jesus is a lamb that is killed, and the lambs were killed on Thursday. And so let's have him die on Thursday. The others are trying to communicate this was a Passover thing. So let's have him die Friday.
Yeah.
And so, but that doesn't mean that he didn't die. And that doesn't mean he didn't die that weekend. It doesn't mean that like they're making anything up. But the way they told history, they were okay with highlighting meaning in the way they retell it.
Mhm.
And I think we're not even realize how often we do this when we retell stories in our own lives. Like we'll embellish a detail or we'll focus on one thing and not another, and we'll tell someone else's story and it'll sound completely different because we're focused on different things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we like to act like we don't do that, but we do.
Yeah, we do all the time. Yeah. Um,
I do that all the time.
yeah, yeah.
I will highlight yeah, you gotta know your audience,
Right,
and
exactly.
they knew that too, and that's why they are different, that's why they overlap in some ways and don't in others, and very clearly are trying to highlight different aspects of what the gospel is trying to convey, yeah.
But I just want to show like that doesn't mean that it's unreliable.
Yeah.
In fact, I think there's a reason we have 4 gospels. It's because we want all of those perspectives.
That in and of itself is sort of confusing when you think about it, it's just like
Yeah,
from an outside perspective, it's like, shouldn't there be, like, one coherent version of this if it's supposed to have happened? And then it's
right.
like,
Yeah.
"No,
But
there's 4," and you're
that's
like,
not even how a jury works. Like this is like a cliche like saying, but it's kind of true. Like if you ask 3 people about an event and they give you the exact same details piece by piece, you know they talked to each other ahead of time and kind of like figured out their story.
Right.
If they all like give you a slightly different detail or remember something slightly differently, it's probably true, and they probably just perceived it from different angles.
Or if you just, like, isolate people rather than letting them all
Right.
converse, they will, 1, color it in different ways, and 2, have different accounts of events based on what their experience was and how just, like, they are as a person. You automatically will do that, even if you don't intend to.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah. So my point is when the early church talk about reading the Bible literally,
mhm,
they don't mean modern biblical literalism.
yeah.
Um, Augustine, either pronunciation I think is fine. I like Augustine. I think people hate Augustine and they like Augustine. I don't know. Well, do you?
That's one of those things where it's people like, did you grow up in, like, more of a liturgical
You
setting,
say
or did you?
Augustine?
I refuse to answer that question.
Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, he wrote a book called The Literal Interpretation of Genesis 1. And he starts off like, obviously God didn't make it in 7 literal days. That's like his first line. He's like, and Christians who believe that are making us look bad. That's how he starts. And he's pretty harsh on it. He's a little pretentious in the way he wrote, and sometimes, even though I really like him. An origin, right? It's a very similar. He's like, the Genesis one is clearly not intended to be historical, but let's look at what the truth is in it. Let's
Mm,
look at the allegorical meaning. Let's look at the patterns that appear and how they repeat later. But then when Augustine and Origin talk about Jesus, they're like, of course, the bodily resurrection is the center of our faith. The Holy Spirit coming is the center. They were able to distinguish without it destroying the reliability of the Bible in
yeah.
any way.
Like, "Oh, this doesn't match up," or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Throughout church history, I think it's important to say there's been a diversity of readings of those texts. And I think it's important to wrestle with that as well. And I think it can sound, again, it can sound pretentious or elitist to be like, you can't just read the Bible and understand it. You have to do historical context. And I don't want it to come off that way. Maybe it is coming off that way. I don't know. But I do think it's important to be humble readers of the Bible.
Mm,
And Tim Mackey and Bible Project, they bring up this point a lot, but that like reading the Bible is a cross-cultural experience. And when you travel to another country, like, I went to Paris once and went on the Eiffel Tower, the elevator, and this dude came in from Kentucky, and he was like, "Are you American?" I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Oh, man, this building's so overrated. I just wanna find some chicken in the McDonald's or something. Am I right?" I was like, "Oh my god, I hope I'm not like this guy. I do not wanna be this kinda tourist." You know what I mean? I was a little judgmental. But I was also just like, if I'm going to a new country, I wanna learn a little bit of the language. I don't wanna be just assume everyone's gonna speak mine.
yeah.
I don't wanna assume the culture is gonna be the same as mine. I'm not gonna get offended every time their culture does something differently than I would, because maybe I'm in the wrong, or maybe my culture is weird and I don't realize it, you know? Maybe there's just difference and one's not weird, but it's just unfamiliar. Um, and when we read Shakespeare, we have a hard time understanding, and he wrote in English, like, 200 years ago. Is that right? 200?
I don't know
Something like that.
the time.
300 years ago. How much harder would it be to read something written in the Middle East 4,000 years ago in a different language, translated? And so my point isn't that it's just hard to read the Bible. I think there's so many resources that we can learn to read the Bible.
Mm,
And again, we don't have to know everything about the history behind it. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to read the original languages to read the Bible. You don't. That's not what I'm trying to say. I think we can be humble readers where we realize this comes from a different culture and a different time period.
yeah.
The authors had different assumptions. So when I read it, I'm going to read non-judgmentally. And like that doesn't mean I can't I my of course my own biases and questions will come up, but I'm not gonna force the text to answer them when that might not be what they're doing.
Yep.
I'm not gonna force them to fit my categories of what counts as history and what doesn't. I'm not gonna, like, expect them to fit my categories of science because that's actually a little bit, I think, prideful to bring it into the text that way. And again, my goal is not to bring, like, shame or guilt because of that. I think it's good intentioned because we wanna take the Bible seriously. But I think there's an unawareness that we can bring to it that, instead of receiving it as, like, a gift from a different time and place. and that there's a basic amount. Again, we can read the whole thing in English and get a lot out of it without any historical context. But when you wanna push into a deeper level, to think that you can do that without learning a little bit of the history and or, like, a little bit of what things mean, which
Yeah, yeah.
is more accessible today than ever, again, with tools like Bible Project, Bible studies online, stuff like that. But I think and books like this. But I think that that's an important first step. And again, in the church too, this was not the only way they read the Bible. This was just like the first way. And it's an important one, like a foundational one, but it's not the only way. Anyway, that's my rant.
Yeah, and, like, speaking a little bit more on the moral interpretation too, like, just because the Bible, or at least whatever books speak to ways to live life, like wise ways to live life, just because it doesn't, like, answer all your questions with extreme granularity, lay it out for you, doesn't mean that there aren't, like, ways that you can think about living your life faithfully, but it doesn't exactly lay it out for you, and that's okay for the same
Yeah.
reason that you said. It's like, these weren't questions that people were thinking about because they didn't live now, and maybe they would have if they were writing them now, but they're
What
not.
one of the questions I get from students so often is, why doesn't the Bible talk about dinosaurs?
Uh-huh.
I get that so frequently. And they're like, are the dragons dinosaurs? And I'm like, okay, remember, they're writing in this time period, 4,000 years ago. There were no dinosaurs then. They did not know there were dinosaurs then. They could not have known. So they're not gonna write about it. The things they're writing about are the things they're experiencing around them.
Yeah.
Even the things that they're like their relationship with God, the things they're seeing, God is telling them what's gonna help them in their moment. He's interacting with them where they're at. Even the fact that we get it in a human language limits what God communicates
Yeah.
because human language only has so much capacity. Um, and when you translate human languages to another, those translations only have so much capacity. And God works through that. And I think that's what makes the Bible so beautiful is any language, any translation, it's still the Bible. It's not corrupted because it's changed or whatever,
Mm.
but that it's the story God communicates. God communicates in the messiness of it all. And you still get that. Uh, even though it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the same every time. Like the Quran. Like it has to be in Arabic in the same way or it doesn't count. And the Bible does not work that way. So, Bible doesn't talk about dinosaurs, I'm sorry. But the reason is because they weren't thinking about dinosaurs, and so why would it?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, or I've seen apologetics too be like, "Oh, look at this psalm, talk about the ocean." And in this scientific way, they couldn't have known that then, and that's how the Bible we know is true or something. I'm
Mm.
like, actually, like, the point of the Bible being divine is that humans wrote it in their capacity. And that doesn't mean they didn't like, I still think because of the allegorical one, which we'll talk about next week, um, you can get more out of a text than what the author intended. But you can't get something entirely, like, scientifically different. That's not the goal.
Yeah.
Like, there is a hidden intended meaning as well that is historically and culturally rooted. Um, maybe one we can set up for next time and build off in the allegorically way is, Isaiah talking about, in Isaiah 7, he talks about this famous, like, virgin birth story that gets quoted in Matthew when Jesus is born of a virgin.
Mhm.
And we read it going back being like, "Alright, how is he talking about Jesus?" And then you read it and he's not, and you're like, "What? What is he intending to write about?" Because he's talking to the king Ahaz in Judah, and he's like, "You shouldn't have made military alliances. We weren't supposed to do that as Israel, and it's gonna come back and destroy us. Um, unless you trust God and don't team up with Babylon or Syria, like, don't do it." And he's like, "I think I'm gonna do it." And he's like, "Here's the sign that you shouldn't do it. A child will be born to a young woman, and his name will be Emmanuel, God with us. And by the time he grows up, like, we'll be safe if you don't do it." And he doesn't even say virgin. He says young woman. And then you're like, "Oh, that has nothing to do with Jesus, it has to do with his political climate at the time." And the historical reading of that story is what was the political climate of Israel? What was Israel supposed to be doing to be covenantally faithful with God? Why was God gonna let them get destroyed? And it's not until we get to the allegorical reading where Matthew can look at that and be like, "That was about Jesus," and how he takes that step
Yeah.
that I think is important. But that's the second level, not the first, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. That's a tease for next
It's
time, I guess.
exciting.
Yeah. Again, so much of my childhood grew up, like, defending the literalism of certain parts of the Bible that I think were misunderstood because the Bible wasn't written that way. Um, but that doesn't mean it's not historically reliable either. I think that's important. Like, there's a historical reliability to these events that are significant, of Israel being formed, of the kings of Israel failing, of the exile, and we can confirm a lot of that through archaeology and stuff. But that the point isn't that it's all the same. Like, it's not all meant to be read the same way. And I don't think it's I think the humble reading is figuring out how is this part meant to be read. I don't know. In your tradition, I feel like there's less of there you got less caught up in maybe this culture war of how you read the Bible literally or not.
Yeah.
And you took the important parts of the Bible very seriously. Again, Eastern Orthodox Bible is central, but they don't talk about it that way. They're not hung up on those details. Um, Actually, the largest traditions church traditions in the world, the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, have no problem with scientific advancements of today. They're like, "The Bible does not contradict that because that's not what the Bible's talking about." But this small subsection of church that I grew up in did, and not for bad reason, for good reason, because they were afraid of maybe some of the ways the culture was going. But I don't know. I just how does that hit you as someone who maybe didn't grow up in that part?
It
In
just
closing.
yeah, it wasn't like a it wasn't an issue for me. Cause like, I remember going to, like, biology class and being
Yeah.
like
'Cause you're a biochemist.
but yeah, my
Yeah.
degree is in biology, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
And I was told, "Be careful if you study that in college because you could not be a Christian if you study."
right, you come out of it being like, "Oh, maybe
Yeah.
I only believe in evolution."
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, and like a big conversation in, like, Christian school settings is like, how are you combating the idea of evolution with creationism? And it's
Yeah.
just like, I feel like so often that conversation is just sort of like a useless conversation. It doesn't it doesn't really get us anywhere because all it does is, like, hope to, like, equip people to have, like, battles of wits and, like, "Oh, I wanna go and one up you with this gotcha thing that I cooked up in my classroom," or something like that. Um, yeah. I tried not to be in a part of any of that kind of stuff going up because it just didn't seem useful. It didn't seem like it was worth, like, arguing about,
Yeah.
I guess. I just tried to see the good in what the scripture was saying. And for better or worse, like, maybe I didn't dive into it as much, but now I've definitely had the time to do that. But yeah, I didn't I didn't spend a lot of time in that kind of context,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I'm kinda grateful for.
Yeah. You don't have the baggage to have to sort of hear
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I, yeah. Maybe to push back against myself, because it's easy for me to say this having gone through that.
Mm.
And I think sometimes we're harsher on ourself or the previous
Absolutely, yeah.
version of ourself
Yes.
than we are on other but I think anyone who does come to the Bible this way, just like, let's take as much literally in the way I define that as possible, is super well intentioned. It's not meant to be like an ignorant whatever. It's like, how can I take this seriously?
Mhm.
How can I show that I am trying to follow God through the text that he gave me? Um, and I think that is good, a good impulse.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. I just want to kind of bring comfort in like, you don't have to be scared when it gets more complicated. When your history teacher tells you that that certain parts of the Bible can't be verified archaeologically, you don't have to freak out.
Right, my identity crisis.
Yeah, yeah, and that's okay. Or your science, like, that's part of the wrestling. And I don't wanna play fast and loose with the Bible and be like, "This actually, if it gets challenged, just accept." My goal is, like, we have a tradition already that goes back 2,000 years about how to read this text. We've got this text from those people, and we got the rule of faith for how to read that text from those people. And that rule of faith gave space for you to look at the history of how these texts were written, and gave space for you to have to wrestle with which parts are historical and not. And that the church, since the first 100 years after Jesus, has had those questions, wrestled with that, and been
Yeah.
okay with that.
Yep.
Not that, like, now we know better and we know something's historical or not, but that then was like, I don't know if Jonah was swallowed by a whale. That's not really that important to me. Like, but what is the point of the story, and uh what is the proof or not proof that this was meant to be historical? Um, or C.S. Lewis doing the same thing. And I think it helps to realize, oh, when we have those questions, we're not being bad Christians.
Mhm.
Everyone in church history has had those questions, and they've given us permission and ways of wrestling with that, of not being afraid of history or science, and not thinking that the Bible is conflicting with them, but actually that the Bible was written in a different way, and that parts of it are meant to be historically reliable, and parts of it aren't, and that the whole Christian tradition has always given room for that and wrestling through that. Yeah. All right.
Comforting.
Comforting, hopefully.
I would say it's comforting, but I'm used to that, so
Yeah.
for people that might be hearing some of that stuff for the first time, maybe
Yeah.
some digestion.
That's okay. Maybe the next two will help a little bit, or maybe it'll make it worse. We'll see. But we'll do the allegorical nun next time. Thank you so much for listening. We would love to hear from you. If you have questions or thoughts on today's episode, please feel free to reach us at info@kingdomcommentary.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please give a rating wherever you found this podcast and share it with a friend. It helps us a lot. Finally, Kingdom Commentary is a 501c3 nonprofit supported by listeners like you. If you would like to give to the show, please go to kingdomcommentary.com/give or subscribe to our Patreon for more exclusive content where we get a little bit more real. Kingdom Commentary is co-hosted by myself, Matt Holliday, Joshua Brinley, and produced by Will Kuntz. Be sure to check back next week where we have a brand new episode continuing the discussion on how the early church read the Bible.